Welcome, everyone, to another awesome episode of the Fishing Loons podcast, brought to you by who, Andrew?
The average Ontario anglers.
I thought he was going to say brought to you by us, but it's not as cool. Today, we have a really cool episode. I know last week we had a very comical episode, we'd like to say, but this one is a little more painful. If you're listening to this, I apologize in advance because your Monday drive to work, it's just going to remind you of failure. But
that's right. Jesse's going to be singing you all the greatest hits from the 80s with no auto-tune.
If anyone's doing that, it's definitely going to be Andrew. But I'll tell you, the one thing we can learn from failure is how to do better in the future. So today we're actually going to be talking all about reasons why we lose fish. May it be bad hook sets, may it be having a really dumb net partner that nets your fish wrong, or other gear failures. We're going to be talking through some of that stuff, and we're going to talk about why it happens. And we're going to talk about how you can stop it from happening in the future. So in 2026, you can catch the most fish possible. But before we get into that interesting episode, we actually have something else interesting. And that is, as tradition states, we have the interesting fishing fact. And that is going to be brought to you by Andrew. He told me it was interesting. I'm ready.
Yeah, but I say that all the time. I say that to all the boys.
He lies.
So we've talked before on this podcast, we've had whole episodes about terrifying creatures, scary creatures. This is 100% factual, the creature we're going to talk about here. It's real. It's dangerous. It exists. And us as Canadians primarily deal with it every single year. Specifically in the spring is when it's most aggressive. Do you have any ideas as to what I'm going to be talking about, Jesse? And as anglers, I guarantee you'll be crossing paths with these guys.
I was going to say flooding, but it's an actual animal.
It's an animal.
Beavers.
Not quite. We've talked about them before, but they're not beavers. We're talking about cobra chickens. Geese.
I hate those things.
So I was doing research into...
cobra chickens. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good. I didn't make that up. That's internet lore coming into my vocabulary. But I was doing research into why are they such like a bane of our existence? Like every single spring, basically, there always seems to be stories. I know I've dealt with them a bunch of times. I'm sure you have too, Jesse. So springtime is the time of love, which means hormones, which means these geese are just going nuts. They've got testosterone, they got prolactin. They crank the territory instincts in these geese way up when they have these hormones in them. Essentially, their brains go into defend everything mode. This includes defending their nests and defending their mates by goslings, defending areas that might someday contain nests. Like they just defend everything. And that's why a goose will attack you even when there's no visible nest. You're not trespassing on its location. You're trespassing on the concept of its future home. That's these geese. And you have to keep in mind, geese are a prey animal. So they are, for a defensive stance, some animals will try and hide. You think of things like good camouflage and whatnot. Geese, they know their prey. And so their defense mechanism is just intimidation.
It works.
It is genius because it works really well. They'll spread their wings to look bigger. They'll hiss to mimic other predators, like a snake and stuff like that. And then they'll charge aggressively to force whatever predator, what they perceive as a predator, to hesitate and to double think, hey, should I attack this thing that's now acting this way? And it works. Most predators will rely on surprise and confidence, and the geese counter this by being the most confident thing in the area. That's their goal. And it works. Humans, I know me, we panic, we back up, we say, I don't want any problems with you. And the goose says, I won. That's their logic. On another side of it, we as humans have not made the problem any better. We've done worse. Not only do we live in where their natural habitat is, there's going to be, cohabitation, ideally. But geese have learned over time with interaction with humans is humans usually don't fight back. Humans usually run away. And sometimes humans have food. That's like a deadly combination of this creature who has confidence coming out of its wazoo to be, okay, I will attack you now because I'll either get fed or you're going to run away, which I want.
Yeah.
So they pass on this behavior to their young, and the young become more and more brazen, more and more confident. So it'll actually, like, in 50 years, who knows what these things will be doing to frighten us. That's a scary thought. But the cool thing is, unlike some other creatures who have this or a similar way as a defense mechanism to just, put up a bunch of bravado, the geese, they don't bluff. It's not fake. Yes, they know their prey and their defense mechanism, and their goal is, I want this thing to run away. I don't want it to fight me, but it will defend itself. It will complete that charge. It will hit you. It will bite you. So on land, when a goose starts charging at you, it can sprint, get this, 24 kilometers per hour or 15 miles per hour. That's about the speed of like your casual jog turning into a panicked run. Like that's around that speed. For comparison, average human walking speed is 3 to 4 miles per hour, 5 to 6. Jogging speed is 5 to 6 miles per hour or 8 to 10 kilometers. But then you get into flight. If this thing decides to take flight after you and continue chasing you, their cruising speed is 30 to 40 miles per hour or 48 to 64 kilometers per hour. And in favorable winds, they have been found reaching speeds of up to 70 miles per hour or 113 kilometers per hour,
Wow. That's
which
fast.
is faster than most people expect. It's faster than a lot of speed limits. And it's definitely faster than your emotional readiness for a bird coming at your head.
And it happens.
And that hiss, that's escalation. That's not so much a warning. This is now attack mode. I'm starting to attack you now. That's what the hiss is. It has insane eye contact with you. It doesn't it's constantly keeping a bead on where you are. It's assessing the threat. And most animals give up on, they give multiple warning stages. Things like a rattlesnake is like, first, it'll do a slight rattle, then it might be a constant rattle. Might do a false strike, like a box strike. And then maybe it'll try to flee. And if not, then it's going to try and strike you. The geese are different. They just start skipping steps. They're like, I don't like you here. Full on attack now. They may give warnings. They may just start attacking you. They operate in a very high aggression, low retreat model. So they will almost never retreat themselves. They will attack until they've won. But talk about size. We look at them and you oftentimes see them out in the field. They're not very big. And weight wise, 7 to 14 pounds. It's not big. But they behave like there's 300 pounds in a union, and they're gonna, come at you. They have a long neck reach, so they can bite, and those bites, they hurt. They have strong wing joints that are capable of striking. And talk about reach with the wings. This thing, again, may only weigh up to 14 pounds, but it can have a wingspan of 6 feet or 1.8 meters. And when they hit you, it's not like a pillow fight of like, oh, it's feathers hitting me. Like, this is a wing full of bones. And it is a marathon runner, like flyer, flying thousands of kilometers a year. These things are meaty. And when it hits you, people describe it as surprisingly solid, not like a cute strike. Like, these things hurt. So when us as humans, when we have our soft, squishy flesh come up to a bird who is screaming, flapping, charging, hissing at us, our instinctual reaction is to back away and let the goose win that fight. But why do we have these encounters? And we think, okay, and for anyone who may not be as familiar with dealing with Canadian geese, especially during their breeding season and when they have young in the spring, it's like, well, why are there so many instances? Why are you talking about this? It's because as anglers, or as anyone who lives in Canada, we are in the same areas as these geese are. They're looking for open areas. Could be a parking lot, could be a walking path, could be the boat launch. And again, it's just standing on top of a dock and you have to go to your boat that you tied up 5 minutes ago and now there's a goose there. How are you going to get past it? Fun fact is, you can't.
Yeah.
So these things, geese have learned 3 things with their experience. Humans are bigger, but humans hesitate. Humans retreat when they're charged, and humans don't want to explain goose injuries later. So we usually just run away. So they don't see themselves as aggressive. They just see themselves as being undefeated champions in every fight they've ever been in. So this, I don't have any, besides give them as wide of a berth as you can. But if you find yourself with a goose who's marked you as his enemy and claims that you are in his territory, whatever he deems that to be, best wishes to you. Maybe run, but he can still catch you if he really wants to. So do whatever you can to avoid these conflicts, and maybe let your pride go to the wayside. Let them think they won that fight again. Just get out of there.
It's funny. A few years ago, I was fishing with one of my buddies. We were steelhead fishing in, I want to say like early April, something like that. And there was a few spots you could see down the river. And there was this one really, really good spot that I wanted to get down to. And I think it was on the weekend or something. And I looked down at that spot and I was like, why is no one fishing that spot? Man, I'm going to go down there. And I left the spot I was at. And I started walking down through the marshy trail, and I just like walk into the opening where that big hole was. And there's a goose on a nest right there. And he was just like hissing at me. And I was like spun around on my heel and started walking the other way. I was like, that's why no one's fishing here. Yeah. They're aggressive. We actually had two of them on our roof work. So I work in this 100,000 square foot building, and we were hearing like just like noises on the roof. So I went up on the roof and there was two geese up there. And I don't think they had a nest or anything up there, but they were very aggressive. And I was like, oh man. So when the guys went up there to do the HVAC work, I didn't warn them. So I feel bad, but you know what? They make good money.
They
so
were never
can deal
seen
with it.
again.
Yeah. They're still up there. I don't know. That was like 3 years ago.
They couldn't get back to their ladder.
Oh man, that was a good one. You know what? That's something that 100%, if you fish in Ontario, I guarantee you have a Canada goose story.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially like almost getting attacked by one, which is pretty common in Canada. If you're listening to this anywhere else, like around the world, if you're in the States, you 100% have Canada geese around where you are probably, because they fly down there all the time. Like in the winter, we just see them flying down to you guys in the States. We're like, good riddance. In the spring, they come back. I'm like, dang it. but
that's the thing too. They don't get them at their worst down there because it's not breeding season.
Yeah.
Their home ones aren't skyrocketed really until they're back here in Canada.
Yeah.
Who says Canadians are nice?
Yeah. we're tough. We can handle. Anyway, thanks for that interesting fishing fact, Andrew. Now we're going to get into our main topic. But before that, I thought we'd have a little bit of AWA news. Now, it's February. That's great, right, Andrew? We love February. It's the best month of the year, said no one ever.
But, yay, it's so cold.
There's one thing that we always look forward to every spring. Now, if you're really into ice fishing, me and Andrew don't get out ice fishing as much as we'd like. Some guys and girls, they do it like religiously. If we lived more up north, I think we probably would go more. But during the winter, we always look forward to the fishing shows. You have, the Sportsman Show. You have the Spring Fishing and Boating Show. And of course, you have the biggest fishing show in Canada, CanCast. So we always talk about CanCast. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, every spring we talk about CanCast because it's Canada's biggest fishing show. And this year, we always say, and CanCast, it's going to be bigger than ever this year. But this year, it literally is.
Yeah.
Because it's actually
substantially.
It's in 2 locations this year. 2 massive locations. It's so big, they couldn't fit it in one place like last year. They have 2 locations, and they're going to have like buses going back and forth, shuttling people for free back.
And as a point of note, when we say 2 locations, we don't just mean like it takes place in Peterborough there's a memorial building, and then there's also the arena. And there's 2 buildings. And I know a lot of people in the past didn't realize, there's a second building. So guess what? This year, there's those 2 buildings. That's one location classified though.
Yeah.
Because they share a parking lot. Then you go to another place and there's 2 more arenas at another location. So it's basically twice the size. Like this is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And the date is March 29th, which is a Sunday, 2026, obviously. So March 29th, put that in your calendars. You can get tickets right now. Definitely do that. They have, what do they do? Like a month before or something, they always do like these massive giveaways. Like they give away something like every
for 10
day
days in advance or something.
And it's not
thousands of dollars of value.
Yeah. I think like last year, someone won a live scope. Yeah. Like it's not cheap stuff. It's legit stuff. So make sure you put that in your calendars. I'm going to put in the show notes, the CanCast website. You can buy your tickets there. You can gift people tickets. Definitely do that. We're going to be there. And the other part of CanCast is cool. One of those arenas is actually Muskie Odyssey. which is brought to you by as well Muskie's Canada. But Muskie Odyssey is awesome. We went last year, we went the year before. It is a huge muskie show. You go in there, they have everything: rods, reels, boat stuff, tackle, lures, bait makers, like everything. You go in there, everything's 100% muskie. They have seminars, some pretty insane seminars coming up, and that's all going to be included in one ticket price. So you go to CanCast and you're like, hey, even if you don't fish for muskie, you look around CanCast, you're like, listen, I'm done CanCast. I've been there for a few hours. I bought some stuff. Get on the bus, go to Muskie Odyssey, and just go there just to look at the huge lures. Just be like,
if you
that
want to
thing's
see,
huge.
if you want to have a good time, if you've already spent your money, but you're like, I have a few $100s left burning a hole in my pocket, I want a piece of art. Go look at the custom hand-painted, hand-fabricated musky lures out there at Muskie Odyssey, just for fun, because some of them are so nice, you just want to hang it on your wall in the living room. Like, they're nice.
So definitely make sure you are ready for March 29th. That is going to be an epic show. Absolutely massive. You're going to see all your favorite, Canadian brands out there when you're out there. But don't worry, we're going to have a whole episode talking about all the people that are going to be at CanCast coming up in March. But we're not going to get you too excited now because you're going to be slobbering everywhere. We'll wait till next month.
Allow me to wipe off my chin.
Ew. I haven't seen Andrew's chin in years. Let's be serious. So this episode, like we mentioned, it is all about why we lose fish. And we have lost fish, haven't we, Andrew?
Many. I don't care to admit it, but I will. I have lost a lot.
I think back to many fish that we have caught, thankfully. And then I look back at other fish that we have lost beside the boat, far away from the boat, underneath the boat, in the boat. Lots of bad stories that we don't like to talk about. We're going to tell you some of our bad stories so that maybe it's relatable to you, or maybe it's like, you know what? Those guys are dumb. I'm never going to let that happen to me. That's what this episode's all about. So we're going to go through a bunch of different topics and try to help you guys avoid some of this stuff, because some of this stuff, it makes me cringe because I know what happened to me and I'm like, oh man. So anyway, the first one we're going to talk about is fighting fish. So these aren't in any particular order, because if it was, you would just get progressively sadder as this episode went on. So I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. So when you're fighting a fish, we're not talking about like fighting a bluegill or fighting a perch where you just kind of reel it in and it comes in. It might pull a little bit. We're talking about fighting a large fish, steelhead, muskie, pike, big walleye, something like that. Something that you actually have to fight and let some line off your reel. What are some tips that we can do to do it? So there's a few bad habits, reasons you can lose fish while you're actually fighting a fish. And one of them you may have never thought of. It's how you hold your rod. It's all about rod angles. So if you hold a rod straight up, vertically, and you're fighting a fish, you're just holding it straight up. Why is that a bad idea, Andrew?
One, it's going to make that fish want to jump because you're pulling up. So it's trying to lift their head up out of the water, and the fish's instinct is going to be jump. And when they're in the air, very high probability of them throwing the hook.
Exactly. It gives a fish a lot of leverage too. They can pretty much do whatever they want. Again, like Andrew said, it encourages jumps. If you fish for, like, say, steelhead or maybe muskie, and you're fishing and you're fighting this fish, and then you see it start swimming up towards the surface, and you're like, 100% what it's going to do. That thing is going to cartwheel through the air, jump, and then you're going to lose it. And what are some of the reasons, though, Andrew? Like, when a fish jumps, why is that a bad thing? It looks cool. It looks awesome. I love it.
It's very exciting. When it stays on, it's the best thing ever. But yeah, so some of the reason is when you have the fish, when it's in the air, it's actually moving and can shake its head so quickly side to side because air resistance is a lot less than water resistance. And so very quickly, it's going to be throwing the weight of that lure around. That lure is flip-flopping back and forth, and it's actually opening up wherever the hook is embedded in that fish's mouth. As it shakes its head, as it jumps, that hook is actually opening, that lure is pulling weight and opening a larger hole, and it can very easily use that weight of the lure to knock the hook out of its mouth now that it's opened up a larger hole. And in the air, with the least amount of resistance, keeping that steady pressure on it, it is like the fastest that head is moving back and forth is mid-jump. And that's likely when something's going to go wrong with, where it's hooked, where it's pinned.
Yeah, exactly. And when the fish is in the water, generally, you can have tight, direct pressure to the fish.
Mm-hmm.
But when the fish jumps out of the water, it creates momentary slack. And then, as Andrew said, when it starts flinging its head around, so not only is that lure now loose in its mouth, now it's flopping its head around and its body around, and that lure is just winging back and forth. It gets leverage and it just flies out. That's why sometimes you can have a fish solidly hooked, And you're like, no problem. Then it comes up and jumps, and it seems like the lure just flies out of its mouth, like it wasn't even attached at all. It's just like, bing.
Mhm.
And then you start crying. Yeah. One way that you can reduce this is side pressure, which is something a lot of people that maybe they don't fight fish that they don't understand. But side pressure is a huge deal. So whenever I'm fishing, again, I'm not a master at this. I do still lose fish. It still happens, right? But we have a lot of experience fishing for salmon. Salmon are big, large fish that jump. Like sometimes I remember Andrew did last fall we were fishing and he had this one king jump like 12 times. And every time I was like, oh, it's going to get off. And it was like, shaking its head. And it stayed on. And he did a good job because he had a long rod, like a shock absorber, like a very soft rod. So every time the fish jumped, he kept the line tight. But as the fish shook its head, the rod was like, a shock absorber just bouncing towards the rod. And that really helps. Imagine having a pool cue of a rod with no flex. And then the fish pulls its head forward. You're just going to either rip the hook out or it's going to snap your line. So
Mhm.
that's terrible. But side pressure is cool. So the one thing that I never really thought of before a few years ago is if you're fighting a fish, especially in current or something like that, if you have the pressure from the fish, say it's swimming downstream with the current, it has all the
Mhm.
advantage. The current is pushing downriver, the fish is swimming with the current, it's easy for it, and you have all this weight of the current pushing down on it and of the full weight of the fish going straight down, and it's swimming as easy as it can, and you're just pulling your rod vertically and just pulling up on the fish. The only thing you're doing is you're making the fish's head go towards the surface, which again, in heavy current, that's not going to really do much.
Mhm.
B, you're encouraging it to jump. You're not going to get it. So the cool thing is when you use side pressure, you actually turn the fish naturally one way or the other. A fish's head and spine is straight. So if you try to lift its head, you're actually lifting the whole body. But when a
Mhm.
fish is pulled to the side, think of a longer fish like a muskie, a pike, even a salmon or a steelhead. When you're fighting a fish and it won't move in the current, if you pull your rod to the side and start pulling on it, you'll actually turn its head and you can actually kind of make it cut through the current out of the heavy current. It's pretty cool. We've been doing that for years for fishing in the rivers, like center pin fishing and stuff. And I'll
Mhm.
see it so many times. You'll see a guy with a big fish on, like a big bow or something, and it's just like
Just
in the
leaning
current.
back into
It's
it.
just leaning back, and the fish is just sitting there, just like swimming with the current, not moving at all. It's like 25-pound salmon. It's not going to move. And they're just like throwing rocks at it to make it move. It's like you got to start leaning on the side to turn its head, and then it will change and go somewhere else. And the fight is on. Then you can start peeing your pants.
Even if you're fishing in a lake, like let's say you're going, let's say bass fishing, and you're fishing this like rocky shoal and a bunch of weeds, there's like lots of heavy structure around, and you're drop shotting or using a Ned rig for like some smallmouth, let's say. Again, you're not having current around you, but if you hook into a fish, you can, by using side pressure, help turn them, try and keep them more into that open area. When they're going towards the weeds, you pull opposite, pull the other way. And sometimes you can even pull their head even in water like that because you're putting the pressure against it. And so even in that, it's a good tip to make use of, practice, and put some thought into it during your rod control during a fight.
Yeah. And one tip I will give you if you are fishing salmon, steelhead, muskie, any species that is prone to jumping, not as much like walleye, but any fish that's prone to jumping, if you're fishing and it's coming towards the boat and you see it starts coming up towards the surface of the water, one thing you can do is actually get your rod and reel and dunk it into the water, pull the fish back down. It sounds weird, but you can actually do that. And if the fish is coming up and all of a sudden you start pulling it down, the fish oftentimes, it won't resist to try to jump. A lot of the times it'll just actually like dive under the boat, which sounds sketchy, but oftentimes that's a better situation than a fish fully jumping out of the boat, especially if it's hooked sketchily. Like sometimes you'll see like, oh, that muskie has two trebles in its mouth. You're good. But sometimes you'll see and it's just like hooked right on the outside of the mouth, like with one barb, and you're like, I do not want that fish to jump. So I'd rather it dive
Especially
under the boat.
Especially because if it does jump and that lure comes off, you've got a 9-ounce lure heading for you with some razor sharp BKKs.
Yeah. Slightly scarier than a cobra chicken. Speaking of getting fish beside the boat, what's the next one, Andrew?
So, yeah. I was like, where are you going with this? We're done that unit. So, yeah, boat side is where a lot of fish get lost. And that's been our experience too. They don't happen. Like, you can lose some on the strike. Sometimes you get a hit, but you miss it. But who knows? Maybe they didn't hit it and get lures and hooks in the mouth. But you think you get complacent. The fight's almost done. And that's when the mistakes start happening, is right boat side. And as fishermen, that's right when you start to see the actual fish, when you can imagine yourself telling the story of how you caught it. And then next thing you know, you're telling the story of how it got away.
Yeah. And to add, this is also boat side, but also shore side if you're a bank angler. Yeah, same thing.
Very similar to the last, we'll start off with is a rod tip. If you're high sticking, the rod tip is straight up at the surface, you're high sticking it. There's a couple things that'll happen there. One, you have a high risk of damaging your rod because all the weight's now pulling straight down on a rod. But again, for speaking of losing fish, you're putting pressure up. Likelihood of that fish jumping is very high. Let's say you are using something like monofilaments where it has some stretch in the line. You only have 6 feet of line out, so there's not much stretch that's going to occur with that during that jump. So there's not a lot elasticity left over in your combo, in your rig, in order to absorb that, help keep that fish pinned when it's jumping beside the boat. So again, don't high stick it at boat side. Try and sweep the rod, keep it low to where you can actually land that fish and get a hold of it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that it happens to all of us, especially if you're someone that likes to video or like vlog or video or capture the fight of the fish. Like you may have a GoPro strapped on your chest or something like that, and maybe you just have your phone in your pocket and you're like, all right, I got this fish, it's coming in. You start like ruffling through your pocket to get your phone out, and you're like trying to get type in your passcode and get the camera out, and then what happens? You're not paying attention to the fish. You might have literally like your rod in your kind of your hand or like between your legs. I've done that. And you're trying to grab the thing, and then the fish comes right to the side of the boat, to the shore, and it gets off. That's happened to me so many times. I've kicked myself so many times because I'm like, oh, I have this fish. I want to get a video of it getting like scooped up with the net. And then I'm screwing around with my phone stupidly, and I lose the fish because I wasn't paying attention. And, let off pressure on your rod and your reel, and then boom, you got slack line, fish jumps, you're not paying attention. You need to have 100% attention. It's also good to have a fishing buddy with you so he can film for you or scoop up the fish for you, or do both if he has two hands.
And we won't go too far into the netting now because we do have a whole other one later on about netting fish. But one of the things too, when it's we're going to talk later more about the net man's responsibility to make sure it gets landed. But for this one, if you are fighting the fish yourself, and especially if it's a longer fish like a pike or something like that, let's say it's a perfect net job and that is in the water, it's ready to go. You're swimming that fish head first into the net, perfect. But then right as the head of that pike goes into the net, and you're using, let's say, a smaller diameter bass net or something like that, your line starts hitting the top ridge of that net. And then as the pike wants to swim in, it's actually getting turned away by that line outside of the net again. So once that head has kind of entered the net, it seems counterintuitive, but if you drop your rod tip, you give a little bit of slack, that allows that fish to then enter fully into the net without that line hitting any of the edges, something like that. That will then give a different feel of pressure, make it want to turn its head and jump back out. So that's something that can help as the angler who is fighting the fish during a net job process. That will help tremendously as well. Once you get that front half of the fish in or the head into that net, dip your rod in, just let it make the rest of the way in.
Mm-hmm. And one hilarious boat story kind of comes to mind. I was fishing with Mike from Waterwolf Lures. I want to say last year before, I forget. We're out muskie fishing. He ended up smacking a big, not a huge one, but like it was like a 44, 45 incher. And he's fighting it on one side of the boat. And he's just like, it was deep. Like it was like 15 feet down. He's pulling it up, saw the fish just, shaking its head down there. And I had the net ready and I'm like, all right, let's go. But when when someone has a big fish on, you don't want to get in their way because sometimes you have to kind of run around the boat. Or if you're on the shore, you might have to run up and down just to get around obstacles. Because if a fish is going a certain way, you have to go that way. You can't just be like, I'll just tug them this way.
Yeah.
You probably can with heavier gear. But if you don't want to lose that fish, you kind of have to baby them, right? Anyway, he's fighting the fish on one side. He's like running up the side of the boat. He has a trolling motor down. So he's trying to keep the line away from the trolling motor. He's like, I'll pull the trolling motor up. Fish goes on. He's on the one side of the boat. The fish goes straight down and under and jumps on the other side of the boat. I was like, whoa. So he went around the other side. We scooped it up. But you never know. The moral of the story is you never know what a fish is going to do. Sometimes they're crazy. I remember that one time I think it was you, Andrew, when we had that fish and it dove under the boat and the line got stuck on a rivet and snapped the line.
Yes. Yep.
It was just like it dove under the boat and it was just like ting.
Yeah.
That
That's
was a
like one of those things is like we already talked about. Sometimes you got to dunk your whole rod underwater. Just
yeah.
you don't want that line to touch the hull. You don't want it to, yeah. Sometimes you got to do some acrobatics yourself to get this fish in who's being acrobatic itself.
Absolutely. So one of the main things I'd say, main reasons why you lose fish or even fail to hook them in the first place. We talked a little bit about this on our last episode is the fact that you have to sharpen your hooks or upgrade your hooks to premium sharp hooks. Now, we always talk about upgrading hooks. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you'll know that when we buy a bait, generally we're going to add better hooks on it. That's not always the case. Like we were talking last week, I was like, oh, I bought a bunch of new lures and it seems like a lot of the new baits have pretty good hooks on them. It seems like there's not many brands where you'd buy a hook now and you're like, this is garbage, but it does happen. Like for instance, I just bought this bait the other day at sale. This is just like a jerk bait. I got it for pike because it's Fire Tiger, my favorite for pike. But I don't know what kind of hooks it has on it, but they're pretty sharp. I won't replace these for pike because for pike they're going to inhale the bait. It's got sharp hooks. That's good. But sometimes when you're fishing for like muskie, for instance, the hooks that come on the bait, they may not be the sharpest hooks. They may be sharpenable, but you definitely need to sharpen them. Things that you should never believe. You should never believe that the hooks look sharp. You ever like looked at a hook and you're like, that looks sharp, and then you touch it and you're like, that's not sharp at all.
It's like looking at a kitchen knife. They all look sharp, but some are just hazardous to try and use.
It's true. The other thing too is you have to think when you have a sharper hook, we always think that fish have soft mouths. Like they don't. A lot of the fish, they have hard, bony mouths. When you're getting like a needle, when you go to the doctor, say you have to get an injection of some kind, what would you rather have? A really thin, sharp needle or a big, thick needle that's dull pushed into your arm? I'd rather have a thin needle because it goes in easier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Same with hooks. You want hooks that are sharp. You make sure that they're sharp. Have a hook file. There's two different kinds of hook files that generally people use. One is just like a regular file. The other one is that one with the two thin bar files side by side. I really like those. I've been using
that too.
Yeah. And it's one of the things too, I think musky guys are always like, you got to sharpen your hooks. You got to sharpen your hooks. And a lot of them do. But I don't see a lot of bass guys doing it or walleye guys doing it, you know? And that's something that we're really, really trying to do. Like I'll make sure to grab my files out of my musky box before we go camping and do a walleye trip because you're smacking your jigs on the bottom. That hook point is going to roll over. How many times have you missed a fish? You're like, I don't know how that fish got off. And you look at your jig and it's like completely rolled over. You're like, that thing wasn't even hooked. It was just holding onto the bait. Oh man. It only takes one rock, right, Andrew?
Yeah. It reminds me of was it Parks and Rec with that one guy? He's from another country and he's like, straight to jail. Believe it or not, music too loud, straight to jail. It just makes you think of, you're fishing, you hit a rock, straight to sharpening.
Yeah.
You hit a log, straight to sharpening. You catch a big fish, straight to sharpening.
It's a great habit to have though.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll ever regret sharpening your hooks. It seems pretty dumb. You'd be like, you don't need to sharpen those. And if you are fishing a lake where you don't have to sharpen your hooks, there just must be a billion fish out there. Good for you. I work hard for my fish though. I need them to actually get hooked when they bite.
And another thing too is even if you haven't hit anything, you pulled it right out of your tackle box, but there's a bit of rust on it. Do a bit of time, have some grit cloth, emery cloth, or that file, and knock off that rust. Make it nice and smooth again, because that rough surface will impede its penetration ability. So even stuff like that, even if it's brand new, you had it sitting in its little box, but it got wet, your tackle box and the cardboard, pallet box got soaked through, and you pull it brand new out of the package and it's already rusty. Sharpen the hooks. Just get them smooth again.
It's worth it. Once you catch a giant fish on them and it was like hooked super lightly, but it got hooked, you'll be like, yeah, that was worth it. And again, adding to the point of some baits, if they come with trashy hooks on them, don't try to sharpen. You could try to sharpen them for hours. It won't work. Just buy better hooks. You can buy packs of treble hooks at any tackle shop you walk into. There's all different kinds. Like we like a certain amount of brands. We've used so many, like Gamakatsu, BKK, Berkeley, Owner.
For treble hooks, I still love the Gamakatsu Finesse R. Like those I think those are
The
the
G
best,
finesse.
or the G finesse. Sorry,
Yeah.
those are, I think, some of the best treble hooks for crankbaits because they're still thin gauge but a bit stronger. So I love using those on like my stuff that I want to go for pike, but it maybe had hooks that were more suited for bass just because they're thinner gauge, and it doesn't overweigh it. So change out the hooks, but if you do, try and find some that are the same weight, especially for jerk baits and stuff like that, because it will change the action of the bait, especially like if it's a suspending bait and you put on bigger hooks, it'll start sinking. It's just how it is. You're putting on additional weight. So when you do it, yeah, just make sure you're trying to replace it with ones that are similar to what is currently installed on them from new.
And there's tons of articles out there or like discussions on groups where people are modifying like jerk baits and they're like, what hooks, to replace certain
Mhm.
baits. Tons of information out there, tons of them.
And you can experiment too. Like we've talked before in the podcast, for instance, with jerk baits, is they often come with 3 treble hooks, and we'll take all those off and put on one front and one rear treble hook, but thicker gauge. So the overall weight is the same, but it's only 2 treble hooks on it, and it's just easier to unhook pike and stuff. So you can experiment with that as well. It's again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's just good practice to put something on a similar weight.
Yeah. And I like that too. I really like 2 treble hook baits when I can get away with it. I don't like using baits with 3 trebles on it. How many times you catch a smallmouth and it jumps and it's like hooked twice in the head and then like once in the tail because the fish
It comes back in a U shape.
yeah, and you're like, I feel bad. I try to use 2 treble hooks if possible. That's why I showed you this Savage Gear jerk bait. It's a bigger jerk bait, but it only has two treble hooks. And the same is one of me and Andrew's favorites, the X-Wrap. This is the bigger pike size
Mhm.
one, 2 treble hooks. Because pike generally inhale it anyway. You don't want to be trying to get out 3 hooks instead of 2. 2 is better. Anyway, make sure your hooks are sharp. And then the one way, we've talked about this before, but what's the one way, Andrew, that you can quickly test if a hook is sharp?
It's the fingernail test. I mean, it's the eyeball test. No, just kidding. Don't do that. So the fingernail test, if the hook is trying to skate down your nail when you're trying to just drag the hook point along, if it's skating down your nail, it's sharp. But ideally, you want that hook as you're trying to just drag it along. You want it to actually like catch on the top of your fingernail and just stop. I mean, you're not dragging hard enough to embed it into your thumb or whatever, but you want it to catch. You don't want it to just kind of scrape and leave a line down your nail. That's kind of the bare minimum of how sharp you'd want a hook to be. And if it doesn't leave a mark, change that hook.
Yeah, it'll be worth it. And if you hook yourself doing that, you're doing it wrong. Or that's a
Learn by
dang sharp
trial and
hook.
error.
Imagine that. It's just hook right through your finger like, that's sharp. Good job.
But now I got to cut the barb off to get it out.
Man, this next one's pretty good. I'll let Andrew do this one because I get too mad when I think about this.
Yeah, drag. The drag, it can be too tight, too loose, where you never touch it. And I run into that experience where I'll start off first by saying, if you've never touched the drag on your reel, do so, because likely it's seized at this point, and that can be an issue. But if you have your drag too tight and fish, you finally, let's say you're catching sunfish or a bunch of crappie, and you're like, this is excellent. I have my drag maxed out. You're having no issues. But then you hook into your PB bass, that 6-pounder came swimming through the shallows, and you hook it. And all of a sudden it's trying to jump or pull a bit of line out, and it can't. And your line snaps because you didn't have it set to an extent where it's designed to pull line off of your reel before the line snaps. So having it set tight enough, or if it's too loose where you try and set the hook, but it just is spinning, spinning off your reel as you try and set the hook, and it's not tight enough in order to get those hooks embedded. And salmon or trolling and stuff can be tough to get used to how to set your drag, because for salmon trolling, let's say, very hard mouth, usually pretty thick hooks. This is just an example, but your drag may be set, for me, I know I've learned to set it looser than I would expect, because when they hit, they're actually getting the hook embedded and they run so fast like a freight train that your drag is having a hard time keeping up with it. So if you have your drag technically set to the right amount of pound pressure for it to pull line off, that fish is pulling line off so fast that it's actually going to exceed that in a very short amount of time and snap your line. And that happened to me the first time I went salmon fishing with Jesse. But if it's too loose, then I'm just going to grab it, run, and the hooks don't get set into their mouth. So there is a happy medium, and sometimes it can be set judging by just the species that you're going for. But even it could be, most of the time, it's just based on the strength of your line, especially if you're fishing for walleye or for bass. You can set it for the strength of your line. And again, if you might, turn it up or down a little bit depending on the bait or the type of hooks you're using, because you may go from, let's say you're using a, not that you would really want to do this, but you're using a flipping stick and you've been casting jigs or, big 3-4 hooks on it, and you have that drag pretty high because you're using 50-pound braid. But then you decide, I'm going to throw a crankbait on it and it's got thinner gauge hooks. Without that drag set properly, it's not just line that's going to snap, you're going to start bending hooks out. So there is different reasons. You have to adjust your drag for the weakest point of your fishing system.
Absolutely. And like you said, braid and mono, like different kinds of lines is going to affect it, right? So like say we troll for salmon in the river mouths. And for a long time, we kind of switched between using braid and then, because like the fish didn't care. We'd have like a leader, but like we'd use braid, like, whatever, 30-pound braid, 40-pound braid, whatever, trolling like crankbaits. And then I started using mono as well. And, you'd put like 15, 20-pound mono on. And on braid, the fish, if you're trolling at a certain speed and a fish, like Andrew said, they come up and they smack it. And if your drag is not loose enough, when they hit the bait, they hit it going 25 kilometers an hour. And then they keep swimming. It's not like they hit it and stop. They hit it. And as they're swimming, your drag just starts. So if you have braid that has no stretch, that line, even if it's 50-pound braid, it'll snap like nothing. And it's happened to us. Because if you,
30, yeah, on average 30%.
yeah, so if you have 100 feet of line out, that's going to stretch a considerable amount of time. So if a salmon hits that hit going 25 kilometers an hour and smacks your bait and then keeps swimming, and your drag is maybe not perfectly dialed in, you have a little bit of stretch before your line snaps.
30 feet of stretch.
Yeah, which is probably about 1 second in king speed. But the shock
In
absorption
time
of mono is a little better for fishing, for fighting fish, but not so much for getting the hooks into their mouth, unfortunately. But yeah, you know what? One sad story that I'll tell you guys is I was fishing one time, and I've gotten into the habit, and you guys should too. After you're done using a fishing reel, you should loosen the drag off completely, because all of the washers inside of your drag system, they could be made of many different things. They could be made of cork. They could be made of just like composite material, felt, anything. Ceramic, yeah. So when those are compressed, that's what forms the friction to give it a drag. But you shouldn't leave that on all the time, especially over the winter if you're storing them. So I've gotten into the habit of, when I'm done fishing for the day, I'll loosen my drags. And then for the next time I use them, I'll remember to tighten them up. Try to remember. So anyway, what I do now is I loosen them completely. That way I know when I go fishing, I turn the handle and the line won't even go on because it's so loose. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to tighten this. This story, I forgot to do that because I just loosened it halfway. I was flipping this dock. I had this big bass come out. It was a big one. It was like a 4-pound plus largemouth. I saw him dart out, grab the jig. I set the hook and my line was just like
bird's nest.
Literally almost like gave myself a bird's, and I didn't catch the fish. I was so mad. I was like, my drag wasn't tightened at all. I feel like such a moron. And to this day, it still haunts me. That fish is probably still there, fatter than ever.
And another fun little story is if you want to, as good practice, I'll label this as an excuse for good practice of adjusting your reel, getting used to adjusting your drag. If you're fishing with other guys, what you do is, in your spinning reel, you loosen your drag discreetly. Just middle of the day, just loosen it all the way, and then you yell, go on! And yes, pull back on the rod, and you'll get about 3 seconds of fun watching everyone else, scramble for a net or, put their drinks down and stuff. And then you just like, oh, it came off, and you just tighten your drag and carry on as.
Yeah. Man, I've been slamming them today. And then they're like, didn't you listen to the podcast? How are your hooks?
You should have sharpened the hook.
Just be like, hooks? You're using hooks? Speaking of line, line is another big thing about losing fish. Line is
Mhm.
something that I remember fishing with my dad growing up. He's a trout guy, and he would like use the same line for years.
Blue strand.
Like, yeah, it was like, oh, what kind of line you got? He's like, I don't know. It's been on the reel since I bought it. I'm like, what? He's like, how often you change your line? I'm like, I don't know, like at least once a year on reels that I use all the time. If it's like mono at the time,
Mhm.
maybe not braid. We'll use braid for years. Maybe guys that are pros will change braid more often, but I don't know. I change it not even I change it when it literally starts getting frayed up. That could be years depending on
Mhm.
the reel, right?
Mhm.
But if you're fishing line such as monofilament or fluorocarbon, what happens is over time is it actually not only does it, take abuse and get nicks in it and stuff like that, but it also loses its strength. It's kind of like Tylenol. You could technically take it after it's expired, and it might work. It probably works, but it may not be as strong. And afterwards, you will have a huge headache.
Fishing Loons do not abdicate the use of expired over-the-counter pharmaceuticals.
It's not over the counter, it's right on the shelf. But yeah, mono and fluoro loses strength. A lot of different things cause it to lose strength. Again, we talked all about fishing line in a previous episode. Fishing line, it doesn't stay as strong as it is, especially after you fight a bunch of fish on it and it stretches
Mhm.
out. You have UV from the sun. It does get weak over time. So you have to change it. And if it's a reel that you use all the time, like if you're someone like me and Andrew and you have so many reels, it gets to the point where you're like, I can't change all the line on my reels every year. I'll go broke. That's why we use a lot of braid to leader because it's like the braid will last for years. I'll just buy a bunch of spools of leader and I only have to replace 10 feet at a time or 5 feet at a time. That's great. All you have to do is learn how to do a few small knots to connect the connection knots. It's definitely worth your time to do that. But if you're someone that just runs straight mono or fluorocarbon, you have to change that stuff. I have lost fish, sadly, from using old line. Haven't you, Andrew?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like Jesse said, with the some people, yes, it damages the line gets weaker with time. UV especially, and I see guys who store their, two-piece combo in the back window of their car, and it's great. You want to be ready to go fishing at any point in time, but it hurts me when I see that because it's just baking in the sun. And just like how you have old plastic window, if you watch American Pickers or something like that, it's old plastic window displays or old plastic signs, and they're yellowed and they crack. It's super brittle. That's because UV has weakened it. It has made it brittle. The same thing happens with a line. Like monofilament or fluorocarbon is designed to be supple, to have stretch, to be abrasion resistant. As soon as it has that UV damage on it, it becomes much more brittle. It doesn't want to stretch. It doesn't want to, when you start getting nicks in it, it starts doesn't start peeling off little strips. It'll start taking chunks out of the line when you get a nick in it. So the UV especially can really damage it. But even just being exposed to the air and stuff like that, the polymers can actually start to dry out, especially on monofilament and fluorocarbon. And so just being even kept in the cool shady spot can still over time, just by being exposed to the elements or to the air, become more brittle with time.
Yeah. It's one of those things you go into the tackle shop. Buying fishing line is probably one of the least exciting things you can buy at a tackle shop. It's kind of like buying a pack of sinkers. It's just like, you need it, but it's like, it's just boring. You want to buy a fishing lure, or a rod, or a reel, or a hat, or something. It's like fishing line is boring, but it's something you need to do. It's the main thing that connects you to the fish. I mean,
Power Pro and Water Gremlins.
Tiger Special. Another thing kind of related to the line is also the kinds of knots that you tie. And we're not going to
Hmm.
go in depth on knots. We're going to actually have a whole episode on that coming up where we go in depth on our favorite knots. That has to be a whole episode because there's a lot of ranting in that episode.
That's right. It's going to be a big, well downloaded episode too, because it's going to be featured as like the naughty episode.
Yeah, but you need to learn good knots. And I'm sure most of you that are serious anglers are like, you know what, I have 4 or 5 knots that are for different situations. But in all reality, there's different knots that you should be using for braided line, for fluorocarbon, for connection knots. For different times, you need different knots. You can't just be like, oh, I tie this one knot. Like, I'll tie a trilene knot on braid. It'll slip. Guaranteed it'll slip.
Hmm.
You know, there's certain knots you need to tie. Back in the day, when I was young, when I was a kid, I learned the trilene knot. It was the one on the back of the box of trilene. Like, I got to show you this. I got to show you this box right here. Look how old this box of trilene is.
I miss the old graphics.
Do you remember that packaging?
Yes.
Like, how did we go from that? How did we go from that
simplistic
to legit this? Like,
yeah.
like Berkeley, if you're listening, I don't like this. Bring back this.
Yes.
Look at that graphic. It's awesome. Anyway, so when I was growing up, I was young. I used pretty much braid. Braid was like kind of a thing when I was growing up, but it wasn't as popular as it is now. It's pretty much we use mono, and I did a lot of trout fishing. So you had 4-pound. I found this one in an old storage box. Like, this is a legit old. There's no line on it. I used it all, but yeah, I used to use like 4 or 6-pound. But yeah, like you need to buy a new line every year. Like, legit, you need it. But the knots that I would tie is just the trilene knot, because I know oftentimes they used to have a little. Do you remember this? They used to come like a little diagram, like a little leaflet inside of the line. You'd pull it out, and it would have all the little knots you could tie. And one of them was the trilene knot. Yeah.
The Rapala lures used to have every single box came with a little piece of paper inside that was the Rapala knot that had, which is a little loop knot at the end. So it had the movement of the lure and stuff. Like, they used to have little knot tying things in everything you bought.
And the knot, like, realistically, the trilene knot, if that's your knot, good for you. But that's not the best knot. It's okay for mono, but on braid, it'll slip really bad. So I used to fish the trilene knot, and then when I started using braid, I would still use the trilene knot, and I can't tell you how many fish I lost. And I was like, I don't know why my hook is like, why am my line slipping? And then I did some research. This was before like legit YouTube. So I did some research, and I'm like, no, you can't use that knot. It slips. You need to do a different knot for braid. And then when I switched knots to something better, I magically stopped losing fish when I set the hook. I was like, okay.
So I need to come clean here, because again, and we're all about being completely honest here in this podcast, but I did really dumb stuff when I was a kid. We all did. But speaking of knots specifically, I always tied the improved clinch knot, which I think is the same thing as the trilene knot on the back of the package, if I'm not mistaken.
It's pretty much, yeah.
I would always tie that, and we started fishing braid. It's like, this is awesome. And I would tie that, and you'd tie your knot and you pull on a line, and like, oh, that slipped a bit, but then it stopped. Okay, that's good. It didn't pull anymore, and I'd lose pike and whatnot. So I realized that it keeps pulling through. So I thought the best way that I could figure out in my 14-year-old brain, instead of do some research and find a proper line to tie, it was tie the improved clinch knot and then leave a long tag end and then tie a bunch of overhand knots in the tag end so it would slip, but then the overhand knot would like get caught at the rest of the knot, and like, oh, sweet. It helped. I still lost fish though.
This was last week.
Yeah. So if take a bit of time, learn. It may sound like, okay, what's the purpose of doing it? But if you learn to tie, let's say 5 knots, you're well covered for every situation. You have something to tie your mono or fluoro. You have something to tie braid. You have something to tie your mono to your braid. Even 3, like you can get by with just having 3, and you'll be all right. It's a lot better than only having 1. You'll have 3 purpose-built knots.
Yeah, I agree. So the next one kind of goes into something that I think is a reason why a lot of people lose fish, in my opinion. And this is more of like a bougie one, because not everyone owns like 50 combos or even 10. But I know me and Andrew, when we fished when we were young growing up, when we were young teenagers, we had like 2 rods. And that may be a lot for some people, but like we had 2 rods, and now I wouldn't
6'6"
dream
medium and an ultralight.
Yeah, I wouldn't dream of legit bringing 2 rods on like a camping trip or like a cottage trip, But rod and reel mismatches, or just like using the wrong rod for the situation. I'm not saying you have to have a rod for every single thing, but for instance, say that you are fishing crankbaits, which are, baits with 2 light wire treble hooks. You do not want to use, like, say, a heavy power, extra fast action flipping stick, because not only is it heavy power, so the rod doesn't start flexing until there's a lot of weight on it, but then it's also extra fast, so only like the top fifth of the rod bends. That's it. Instead, you want something that's like a shock absorber. You want something that's like moderate fast at the minimum, but probably more of like a moderate action. So the rod flexes well past halfway. So when the fish is thrashing around with those thin hooks that could bend easily, the rod just is like a shock absorber. That's what you want. But on the other side, you don't want to be flipping baits that need a heavy, firm hook set with a rod that feels like a noodle. So it's kind of like you do need a few different rods if you want to be well rounded.
And even the reels themselves. If you have, this is another kind of story. I have a Piscifun, my 300 size reel I use for musky fishing. It's my first large kind of bait caster reel. And when I would use that, it's a 5-to-1 gear ratio, 5.1-to-1, which means every time you turn the handle, and it's a power handle, so it's a long handle, every time I turn it once, that little spool spins 5 times. But again, it's not a whole lot of pickup on a
That's pretty
300
slow.
size reel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so musky fishing with it, there were times when I, cast out, and it's one of those times where the muskie strikes in the first 10 feet of the cast. And I set the hook, excellent, and then it starts swimming towards the boat, and I'm just reeling in. I have my line on the 2 feet up the rod, holding the line because it's just slack laying across the top of the water, and I'm trying to crank this in as fast as I can and keep it tight to the spool so I don't get like loop in there, and then a drag won't work. I'm like, or salmon fishing, using, I think Jesse was using I think it was a 7.1-to-1 ratio on a bait caster when he was casting for salmon the one time. But even then, trying to keep up with a salmon rocketing towards you
Yeah.
is
You can't.
tough.
You can't.
So there are sometimes, can you keep up with every single fish out there? Maybe not. But using something that has a proper gear ratio, a lot of the times we talk about that on the podcast is helping with retrieval speed or helping with the presentation itself for different things. But even for landing fish, if you can't keep up with the fish that is running towards you, you're going after a fast species, you don't want to use something that has a slow gear ratio, because chances are maybe you're able to present it excellently, but now you can't land that fish. So even thinking of your reel or your reel sizes, you can set the hook into a salmon using a nice salmon rod and a size 2000 or 1500 spinning reel. But as soon as it starts running, your drag is going to melt, and it will not stand up to the abuse of a Chinook salmon. Maybe once. It won't, it'll wobble every time you reel in after that. Like it will trash your reel. So going to a size spinning reel or something like that, using reels that are equipped to handle what you're fishing for, that will result in less and more landed fish as well.
Absolutely. And from over the years, the countless times I've fished for salmon down at the harbors and the piers, I've seen so much gear get destroyed. Like rods, mostly snapping, but also like guys coming with just super cheap reels because they're I just bought this cheap thing and it's got like the actual plastic spool. It's not a metal spool, and it's just like it's so like not engineered well that the whole spool is wobbly just by touching it. And a salmon grabs it, it's like it just breaks. It's like, oh man.
I saw one guy hook into a salmon and he had like a push button reel. I'm like, what? Of course, it just started to run and the drag couldn't keep up with it. So the top of the reel just fell off and the line snapped and half his reel ended up in the water. And he's standing on the pier like, you're not getting that back.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of to wrap this one up. So gear combos, again, it's not essential to have like specific combos for everything. Like a lot of the combos that me and Andrew run are more like we call like versatile combos. I hate now that a lot of rods they have specific, it'll be like, oh, this is a buzzbait rod or this is a Texas rig rod. It's like that, okay, it does that well. You can fish 10 other things on that. But I feel like if someone buys a rod and they buy a rod that says, it's for Texas rig, and they're like, oh, I can't fish a spinnerbait on it. It's like, yeah, you can. Believe me, you can. The fish don't care. So I kind of hate that rods are kind of have the names of things on them now. A lot of brands do that. I try to avoid those rods because I think it can mess with you psychologically. Or like, oh, I shouldn't throw this on this rod because it's designed for this. It's like, no, they just want you to buy a rod for everything. But we like rods that are more versatile. I have a few rods that actually say on them, they say like versatile, and that this is the lure weights that worked well with the rod. But even the lure weights, that's just a suggestion. You can chuck giant baits on a medium heavy and probably not break your rod. Don't do that. But yeah, if you have a medium heavy rod and it's rated up to 3/4 ounce, believe me, if you occasionally have to throw a 1 ounce swim bait, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But make sure that you use a proper rod that is forgiving. because mistakes that you're going to make, mistakes happen when fish do stuff that you're not expecting. If you have a rod that is not designed at all, or it's the right action for what you're trying to do, you're going to lose fish. So that's why I tend to avoid extra fast rods when I'm bass fishing. I like rods with a little more flex to them because it helps me land more fish. We'll talk about that rant another day.
But the next thing I was going to get into again was the nets, but
Yeah.
this time more on the side of being the net man. And
The pressure.
there's nothing more valuable than a good net man, and there's
Hi.
nothing more frustrating than a bad net man. Hello. So
Hey, to be fair, to start off, we are both good. I don't think I've chotched a good fish for you, and I don't think you've chotched a good fish for me.
No.
No, we're good.
No.
I've seen horror stories though,
Oh yeah.
and sometimes
I
I'm watching these
almost
videos.
ruined
I'm like,
one for
who?
when we went musky fishing on St. Clair.
But yeah,
for Jonah. I
that wasn't
almost
your
ruined
fault
one.
though.
No, the net was all tangled into the handle, and I was like, the muskie was boat side, and I'm like, I don't have the time to untangle this net because it wasn't ready and prepped. It was like the first fish of the trip of the day.
Yeah.
We didn't think ahead to prep the net. And so the basket of the net was caught up halfway up the handle. So there was like no basket in this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and the handle, and I couldn't pull the handle back. It couldn't extend it out. So the handle's going right to the middle of the opening of the net. Thankfully, it was a small enough muskie. I just kind of used it like a cradle net and scooped it sideways. It did work enough that we landed the fish. But the rest of that trip, we made sure that net was ready to go. And thank goodness I caught a 50 later.
Yeah.
I'm glad that wasn't the first fish.
I do that now, especially after that trip.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I'm musky fishing, that net is open, ready to go, and
Mhm.
untangled against like a chair or something. Ready
Before
to
you
go.
pick up the rod,
Yeah,
pick up the net, get it ready.
Because it's
Yeah,
like when a
especially
muskie
for
hits
musky
right
fishing.
beside the boat.
Yeah.
You have maybe 3 seconds to have that net ready sometimes. Not even. It's not like it's like, oh, where's the net? It's like, it should be ready.
Yep. Haven't known where it is.
Oh.
So some of the things why the network can fail is poor communication. If the net guy starts to panic, starts jabbing at a fish, like it hurts me to see that and to hear those stories. If the net is too small, like when we started muskie fishing, we only had a bass net, and trying to land a 40-inch muskie in that was a horror show. It was not fun.
Well, it was like a big
even
bass net.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't musky net.
Like
not even.
The muskie, it's in the net, but it's like folded in half. Like, okay, having a net that will hold a fish well, even salmon fishing. We've done it before where our salmon net broke. So the rest of the season we fished the bass net with a deeper basket. But even then, like you get the head in and the tail's not fully in the net, so you got to tail it and then kind of awkwardly hold the net to land it. Like having something that is properly suited for it will help a lot. Something else is the net. Besides the net entering the water too late, another issue is having the net in the water too early, especially it being in the way. So there are some times like musky fishing where you'll have the net ready, you kind of have the basket because it's so big, the bottom of that netting in your hand as well, and you're ready at the water, ready to dunk it in and scoop the fish. And I use musky angling because that is, I would say, the best example of a time where the netting a fish is the most important and also like the most
Stressful.
Exhilarating, stressful. Yeah, like
terrifying.
There's a lot that can go wrong with musky fishing and getting the net. So
yeah,
you have very small windows with musky fishing. So when you have that net and you're ready to go, if you had just had the net dangling in the water and that muskie comes up and just swims by it and the treble hook is caught in the side and it's not in the net, but the lure is hooked onto it, that's terrible. You're going to lose, the fish. If you don't, it's a miracle, but it's a guaranteed you're going to lose the fish. So making sure that you have the net ready to go, but maybe not just hanging loosely in the water, that's something as well. So what are some things that you would say is good for netting? What are some ways that you get prepped and stuff yourself, Jesse?
Well, like I mentioned, I think we're doing pretty good on this, Andrew, but we have multiple nets. Like we have between us, I think 5 or 6 different nets.
And not at a time in the boat, just in general. We own them.
Yeah, it is in general, but having the proper net. Because again, we're multi-species. Say you're from the States and all you do is fish for bass. That's great. But up here in Ontario, we fish throughout the season, multiple different species that you need multiple nets. Like we have a wading net when we're float fishing for steelhead. We have a little trout net that we do when we're stream trout fishing. We have two giant musky nets. We actually just got a folding one. It folds in half, which is amazing. But we have Andrew's big musky net for his boat. It has like a long 8-foot telescopic handle. So if you're fishing from a lot of guys on St. Clair, the Detroit River, they fish from like the top of the piers and stuff for the salmon or for the muskie. So you need like a long net, because what's the sense of having a net if you can't reach down and grab the fish? And then of course we have like, regular game fish net for like pike and walleye and stuff. But having the correct net is huge. Like again, if you try to stuff a muskie into like a bass net, you might be able to get the fish in, but it can rip out. So a perfect example of another thing to keep in mind is have the right net, but also make sure you're checking the netting. So I was fishing actually with Bobby Belmonte last year, and we were fishing a lake for pike, and we were prepping for that pike tournament. And he's like, I'm going to go pike fishing. You want to come? I was like, absolutely. Let's go. Never fished the lake before. I was fishing a bunch of, random baits. I was fishing I think a Water Wolf Lures gator tube, like a little 6-inch tube. And I was kind of just rip jigging it through the pike, comes up and smacks it. I was like, oh, great. Bobby scoops it up with the net. I put the net under my knee. I'm like hanging off the side of his bass boat. I'm unhooking the fish. I take the tube jig out, rip it out. I'm like, oh, no, it's Tyson to Bobby. Like, yeah, I caught it on this tube jig. I'm showing him. All of a sudden I look down. I heard a little splash. I look down in the net. I'm trying to reach for the fish. I'm pulling arm. It's not even in the net. I'm like, what? And I look, and there's a hole like the size of like a grapefruit, just like on the side of the net. That pike somehow found that hole, which was actually towards the top. I don't know how he found it, and just like slipped through. Slimy little guy. So make sure there's no holes in your net. Kind of defeats the purpose.
Even the age of netting, because we've had it. Usually we'll go through the netting on our salmon net for like shore fishing or in the canoe and stuff. It's usually 3 to 5 years, something like that, and we got to replace the netting because again, UV damage becomes brittle with time, abrasion and stuff like that. And at some point, we'll be like, okay, like we got to replace this soon. And usually the next trip we go out, the head of a Chinook, like an old snaggle tooth, catches it and rips it. Then he shoves his head and just like muscles his way through the side of that net and puts like a 4-foot-long hole in it. It's like, well, don't have any more landing net for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, having the correct net is huge. Being a good communicator.
Yeah.
As well.
Huge.
You see a lot of videos of guys just yelling, get the net, get the net. I'm like, okay, that's not really communicating. It's just yelling, get the net. Okay, that's good initially. When the guy's standing there with the net, me and Jesse, we have a pretty good communication of, we get a feel for this is nearing the end of the fight, or I feel like this is a good time. The fish is coming up. Maybe the other person can't see it, how far away it is with the line, or if it's overcast, muddy water. And, you're like, hey, it's coming up. He's near the surface. He's coming in, come onto this side, come behind me, be in front of me. If we're on the bigger boat, we can move around on the boat itself. So being a good communicator as to where you want that net man so that you can just swing your rod in, because the guy with the rod is the one who has a better idea of how he can control that fish best. So communicate where you want that net to be. The net man can then be ready in that location to do his job of scooping up, being ready there where he needs to be. So that's another big thing. Get used to doing that. And like we already kind of talked about, having a net accessible for everyone on board and ready to go. So it's not, you don't want to be untangling things or trying to untangle it with, your PB fish fighting for its life on the side of the boat, jumping as you're high sticking it. And and the guy's trying to find, where's the net again?
And it's always like stuck on something when you need the net. It's like, oh, it's hooked in a boat cleat, or it's stuck underneath the seat. But going on a bit about that communication part, like again, me and Andrew have been fishing with each other for over 20 years. And, we've scooped a lot of fish for each other. We've had we fish for muskie, we fish for salmon a lot. We've had a lot of big fish in the net. You get to trust, like I trust Andrew. I know he's not going to jab a fish when it's not, time to do so. But I also know if he does that, I know he's doing it for a reason. He may see that the fish is lightly hooked, and if it gets underneath the boat, he's going to get off. So if he takes a jab at it, generally, he's probably doing that for a reason. And I know it's the same with me. Like sometimes if you have a fish on and you see it's hooked lightly, you're like, oh, it's hooked lightly, it's hooked lightly. Basically, the signal is risk everything and just try to get it in the net. Just do something crazy. Just jab the net in the water, because either way, the fish is going to get off, right? How many times does that happen when you make a crazy jab at a fish, you scoop it, just somehow it gets in the net, and as you do that, the lure instantly flies out of the fish's mouth, and you're like,
there's been a handful of times where like swinging the head. You've done it a couple times for me for sure.
Yeah.
Swinging the head of the bass in or the pike or walleye, and you got the net ready, and like I think it's coming in, and it decides to jump, and you just reach that extra foot, and
Yeah.
you get it, so it throws the hook midair and lands in the net.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll say though, the best net job that I did recently, I was fishing the pike tournament last year with Mike Nabalsi, who is Water Wolf Lures, the guy who makes Water Wolf Lures. And we were fishing this one spot. He smokes this fish. It was big. It was like almost a 40-inch pike. And that's the size of pike you need to win the tournament. If you catch one of those, you're good. And he had this fish smack his bait right beside the boat, and it like jumped around a bit and then thrashed, and the lure flies out. He's like, oh, he was so mad. And we were both like, it just came out of nowhere. We're both like, oh, it's like all pumped up now. And then he just made like a half-hearted cast towards the shore, and he's like, dang it, that sucks. And he made like one jerk with his rod, and this fish just came back and crushed it. Like, I don't know if it was the same. I think it was the same fish. And he had that fish on, and it was underneath, and we saw the fish come up, and we both knew, we're like, if he catches this fish, if it gets in the net, we're winning. We're both like, we were so nervous. And it all happened, and it came right up beside the boat, and I scooped it quick, and just as I scooped it, his lure flew out of the fish's mouth, and he literally like was like, oh, and he like just dropped down to his knees. He's like holding his like the net. We're both like shaking. And we measured it. It was 40-inch on the dot. And we won the tournament. Well, Mike won because he caught the big fish. I just scooped it though. But hey, that shows you how important it is to have a good net man. Because sometimes you'll get to fish with a guy who wins the tournament for you. That's Mike.
If you wouldn't have scooped it, he wouldn't have won. No,
that's what he told me.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, but it's all about teamwork, right? But if you do fish by yourself, you only have yourself to blame if you lose the fish. So just don't yell at yourself too harshly. So anyway, there's lots of things that can happen, unfortunately, where you lose fish. And I think we get into this mentality of like, we watch all these YouTube videos and watch fishing shows. And every time you watch these shows, people are slamming fish, and very rarely you see the fails. Like, oh, I missed a fish beside the boat, or fish jumped and the lure came out. Or, I went out fishing and I didn't catch anything. But that's the reality of fishing, right, Andrew? Like, how many times do we go out and, we don't catch any fish? It happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen as much as all the time,
26,
right?
It's our year this year. It won't happen for us this year.
But that's the thing with fishing that makes it so magical. You can figure something out, and you can fish your favorite spot and consistently catch fish there. And sometimes you can go and catch absolutely nothing because you're fishing for fish and they do whatever they want, just like a cobra chicken. But there are some things you can do to help you catch more fish. Anyway, that was this episode. I hope to God, people, that you can learn something so that you do not lose any fish at all in 2026, including through the ice. Do you have any final tips for the people, Andrew?
Remain calm. Try and keep a cool head. Cooler heads will prevail. And if you can, if you can just remain calm in the situations when you have that awesome fish in the line, and you can avoid these common mistakes we told you about today, stuff that we've all done, stuff that Jesse and I have done, and that we still catch ourselves doing the odd time. But you'll, I want to see some photos of you guys on your successful trips. I don't want to hear about the one that got away. I want to hear about the one that you actually landed.
Absolutely. And how can you send us those pictures? Well, guess what? If you're on Instagram, that's where we mainly are, on Average Ontario Anglers on Instagram. I'm going to link everything. Everything is linked below in the show notes. Direct message us a picture of an awesome fish that you caught. It doesn't even have to be recently because I know it's the middle of winter, but send us a picture of an awesome fish and we'll repost it on our page as well. And if you're on Patreon, as you should be, because you can be a free member, which is awesome. You can send us a direct message there. We have chats all the time with people. If you have any questions about fishing, join our Patreon. The link's below in the show notes. You can join as a free member, or if you'd like to support the show, because there are costs involved in doing this show, you can donate a few bucks to buy me and Andrew a coffee, which is awesome, because you know how much Andrew needs his coffee every day.
I need my coffee when I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to drive Jesse out to the boat and go fishing.
You fool. I have to wake up at 4 a.m. to meet him at his car so that we can get there at 5 a.m. So anyway, we're going to end this episode until next week, or in 2 weeks when we see you guys again for another awesome episode. But we're going to end this episode with what we always do, which is Andrew forgot. the quote of the week. And to handle that on the spot is Andrew.
If you lose a fish boat side, you're a loser. But at least you get a good story out of it.